Hey guys. Tonight we're stepping into a world where silence was more than just an absence of sound. It was the language of loss. Imagine yourself standing in a cold stone church. Its walls dripping with candlelight, and the air heavy with incense. The choir hums a slow chant, Latin words you can't quite understand, and in front of you lies a wooden coffin. Your husband, gone. The priest talks about eternal peace. But all you can feel is how the world suddenly became smaller, quieter, and far more dangerous. You might think losing your Wi-Fi for a day is rough. But trust me, you wouldn't survive a week as a widow in the Middle Ages. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The service ends, and you're left standing among strangers. People whisper, pretending to pity you, but their eyes already measure what's left: your clothes, your rings, your land. In this world, grief isn't just personal, it's political. A widow's tears smell like opportunity to those waiting to claim what's hers. You step outside, the church doors groan shut behind you, sealing the warmth inside. Outside, the village feels foreign, the same cobblestones, but somehow colder now. The baker you once greeted turns away. The neighbor's wife clutches her shawl tighter. It's not that they hate you. They fear what you represent: misfortune. Independence. The uncomfortable reminder that every wife could become you by dawn tomorrow. You walk home alone, your black veil fluttering in the wind like a flag of surrender. The house feels larger, emptier, like the walls themselves are waiting for your next move. And there are rules, so many rules. You're not supposed to smile. Not supposed to wear color. Not supposed to attend festivals or dances. Mourning, they say, must last a year and a day. Conveniently, that's also enough time for your husband's relatives to decide which parts of your life they can take. The first visitor arrives before sunset, your brother-in-law. He's not here to comfort you. He's here with advice. His words are syrupy, but his eyes land on the keys you hold: the chest, the pantry, the gate. You'll need help managing things, he says, already assuming the role of protector, the kind that protects himself first. At night, you sit by the small fire, feeling the silence throb like a heartbeat. There's no electricity. No distraction. Just the crackle of wood and the faint howling of dogs outside. Grief here is not a stage you pass, it's a ritual you perform. You have to wear it like armor. Because if you stumble, if you smiled too soon, or laughed too loudly, the village will talk. They'll say you didn't really love him. They'll say maybe you helped him die. The candle flickers. You catch your reflection in the window, the veil, the hollow eyes, the woman you barely recognize. You remember the priest's words: a widow must be patient, virtuous, and humble. But patience doesn't fill your stomach. Virtue doesn't keep the roof from leaking. And humility never stopped a greedy cousin from stealing a goat. So you start to learn. Slowly. Quietly, you learn who to trust: the washerwoman who slips you bread, the old widow who warns you which men to avoid after dark. You learn that survival isn't about strength, it's about invisibility. You move like smoke through your own home, making yourself smaller, quieter, safer. Yet in the stillness, you begin to notice things you never did before. The way the wind slides through the thatch roof like a whisper. The way the moonlight touches your husband's old chair. You start talking to him, not aloud, of course, but in the secret space of your thoughts. You tell him about the day, the awkward condolences, the empty hours. You even joke with him sometimes, as if he could still roll his eyes and call you stubborn. And maybe he can, maybe in some strange medieval way. People believed he did. Widows often kept pieces of their husband's hair in small leather pouches, worn close to the skin. They'd whisper prayers to those locks, believing the spirit could still hear. It sounds strange to us, like texting someone who'll never reply, but for them, it was comfort, it was connection. The church watched this closely, of course. A grieving widow was unpredictable, emotional, vulnerable, occasionally mystical. The line between prayer and witchcraft was thin as a thread. So priests reminded you often, your husband's soul is gone. Focus on God, but that never stopped the whispers. And in those whispers, you hear hints of others like you, women who lost everything, yet found strange kinds of freedom. A widow could move more freely than a wife, could make her own decisions if she was clever enough to hide them behind the mask of sorrow. Some even ran small businesses, renting out rooms, selling cloth, brewing ale, but not yet, for now. It's just you and the firelight, and the long night ahead. You close your eyes and let the flames blur into orange ghosts. The sound of the wind turns softer, the room warmer. For the first time since the funeral, you exhale without shaking. Maybe the world hasn't ended, maybe it's just quieter. Outside, an owl hoots. A new chapter begins, not of choice, but of survival. And you, widow, woman, shadow, are about to find out what that really means. Some historians still debate whether widows in rural medieval Europe were truly powerless, or if their quiet resilience gave them a hidden strength that changed communities from within. But that's a story we'll unravel together, one night, one whisper at a time. The morning light creeps through the cracks in the shutters, thin and pale like a blade. You haven't really slept, not because of nightmares, but because the bed feels foreign now, too big and too quiet. When you finally sit up, your veil is already waiting on the stool beside you, black and heavy as a sentence. It's strange, isn't it? In this world, mourning isn't just about sadness, it's a costume, a rule book, a prison you wear on your face. You drape the veil over your head, and the world turns dim. Outside, children laugh as they chase a wooden hoop down the lane. And for a moment, the sound feels like blasphemy. How dare joy exist today? You draw the fabric tighter and step outside, where grief is something you must perform. The village notices you immediately. A widow's veil was like a social announcement, unattached, vulnerable, watched, and watched you are, by the priest, by the neighbors, by every old woman who claims to know what proper mourning looks like. They whisper about your clothes, your posture, even how often you leave the house. You remember one saying, "A modest widow keeps her eyes low and her lips still." You try to follow it, but your gaze keeps drifting toward the fields, the place where life still happens. The veil itches against your cheeks. The air beneath it is warm and damp, like breathing inside a secret. You want to pull it off, to feel sunlight on your face again, but that would cause talk. Everything causes talk. You stop by the churchyard well, hoping for water. A few women are gathered there, not friends. Exactly, but familiar faces. Their chatter fades as you approach. One of them, young and sharp-eyed, nods slightly and says, "God keep you." You nod back. It's a small exchange, but in this society, it's a victory, a sign that maybe not everyone sees you as cursed. Still, you hear the whispers when you turn away. "Poor thing," one mutters. "At least she had no children, less to feed." Another adds, "I heard her husband's debts were worse than his temper." You grip the bucket handle tighter. Grief is supposed to make people kind. But in the Middle Ages, it made them curious, and curiosity was often cruel. You return home with the water sloshing in rhythm to your steps. Inside, your house smells of smoke and damp wood. There's a half-eaten loaf on the table, stale already, and a few coins in a jar. Not much. Your husband's tools sit where he left them, and for a second, you imagine his hands still there, rough. Sure, alive. Then you remember the cold church again, and the illusion breaks. You place the water by the hearth and sit. You realize something odd. The veil muffles not just your sight, but your sense of self. It turns you into a ghost of your former life. Someone whose every move must be slow, careful, reverent. You were a wife, a partner, someone who laughed at market gossip and sang when no one listened. Now you are a symbol of loss, of purity, of obedience. But symbols can suffocate. Later that afternoon, the priest visits. His tone is honeyed, practiced, the same voice he uses during confession. "My child," he says, "remember your duty. Pray daily for your husband's soul. Keep modest company. The devil tempts lonely hearts." You almost laugh, but you don't. Instead, you bow your head and murmur the right words. Inside, though, you think about how men like him preach purity while holding the keys to every sin they condemn. He blesses you with a cold hand, tells you to be patient, and leaves, his boots marking neat prints in your yard. When he's gone, you finally lift the veil. The air rushes against your face like a small rebellion. You stand in the doorway, sunlight pouring over you. And for a fleeting moment, you feel alive again. Then the neighbor across the lane sees you and crosses herself. The moment is gone. You sigh, half amused, half defeated. It's strange. This thin piece of fabric holds more power than any law. It can define who you are, what you're allowed to feel, even how long you're expected to suffer. Some widows in noble families had to wear black for years. Others in poorer villages could barely afford dye. So they wore gray rags instead. The color might fade, but the judgment never did. Night comes. You hang the veil by the hearth to dry. But it feels wrong to let it rest, like it should hover there. Watching you, reminding you. You pour yourself a small drink, thin ale left from the wake, and stare into the flames. You wonder about all the other women, sitting before their fires, doing the same, each trapped behind a curtain of cloth and expectation. Maybe they too whisper small jokes in the dark, quiet rebellions. You imagine one saying, "If God wanted us to mourn forever, He would have made black prettier." You almost laugh, and it startles you. The sound feels too bright in this dim room. As you lie down, you think about tomorrow. Maybe you'll visit the market. Maybe you'll keep the veil loose. Just for a bit. A dangerous thought, But you can't help it. Beneath the layers of grief, a spark of yourself still breathes. Historians still debate whether medieval widows wore veils purely out of devotion or because society feared what lay beneath, a woman unbound, untethered, and quietly powerful. You roll over, listening to the fire die. The veil flutters slightly in the night air, almost like it's breathing with you. And in that small, silent rhythm, you realize something. Maybe the veil doesn't just hide you. Maybe, in time, it will teach you how to vanish when needed and be seen when it matters. Tomorrow, you'll test that theory. The next morning smells of smoke and frost. You wake before the church bells. A habit formed by worry rather than faith. The fire has died down to gray embers. And the air bites at your fingers as you dress. Your black gown hangs like a shadow over your skin. It's heavier today. Maybe it absorbed the night's sorrow. Or maybe it's just the weight of everything you now carry alone. You tie your veil loosely. Today, you'll have to face something worse than silence, paperwork. Or rather, the medieval version of it, inheritance law. The word inheritance sounds noble now. But in the Middle Ages, it was closer to a battlefield than a blessing. You see, as a widow, your husband's property doesn't really belong to you. It belongs to the men who decide it should. The local lord, the church, his family, everyone gets a slice. You might get a goat, a small chest of linens. Or, if you're very lucky, the right to stay in your own home until you die. When you reach the manor house, it looms over the village like a sermon carved in stone. Inside, the steward waits, thin, sharp-nosed, with fingers made for counting coins. Not compassion. He nods politely and offers a seat. "We must discuss your late husband's estate," he says, his tone smooth but final. You sit. He unfolds a parchment, the ink still fresh. He reads aloud words that sound like a spell meant to erase you. The widow shall retain her dower rights, provided she remain chaste, obedient, and unwed. You nod, pretending to understand. In truth, it means this. As long as you don't remarry, you're allowed to exist. But the moment you find comfort in another man's arms, the land, the house, even the bed you shared, all revert to someone else. You can't help but smirk. Chaste, obedient, and unwed, it sounds like the worst dating profile in history. The steward doesn't notice your humor. He continues, listing what belongs to the church, to the Lord, to your husband's brothers. The words drone on like the buzz of bees. You stop listening after a while. You just watch his hands, soft, rained, never dirtied by work. Those hands now decide how you'll live. When it's over, he smiles kindly, as if he's done you a favor. You may stay in your cottage, he says, as long as you behave respectably. Respectably. Another invisible chain. On your way home, the world feels sharper. Every sound, a crow's cry, a distant hammer, slices through the cold air. You pass the fields, where men plow the frozen soil. They barely glance up. Work continues. Life continues, while yours has been paused, edited, reduced to a footnote. But you're not done yet. At home, you search through the chest beneath the bed. Inside are a few scraps of parchment, some coins, and a small key. You run your thumb over the metal. It belonged to your husband's lockbox, the one he always kept near the hearth. You open it carefully. Inside, a few dried herbs, 2 wax seals, and a folded piece of parchment. His handwriting, crooked, hurried, a note. You unfold it, and your breath catches. It's not a will. It's a letter, short, but heavy. If you are reading this, then I am gone. Keep the key. Don't let them take what's ours. Trust no one but yourself. You sit there, the letter trembling in your hands. He must have known what would happen, how the world would close in. It's not love poetry, but it's something better, a warning. That night, you light the fire again. Stronger this time, the house flickers with life. You take a deep breath and whisper, I won't let them. It's not a promise to him, it's a promise to yourself. Over the next days, you become an expert at pretending. To the priest, you are devout. To the steward, obedient. To the neighbors, humble. But under it all, something shifts, a small defiance growing in secret. You begin keeping notes of your own, how much grain remains, which hens still lay eggs, which merchants offer fair trade. You even barter in whispers with another widow down the lane, exchanging wool for honey. It's not rebellion, not yet, but it's survival. Sometimes you dream of leaving, of taking the coins, the letter, and vanishing to another village where no one knows your name. But where would you go? A woman traveling alone invites danger, or worse, pity. Still, the idea flickers in your mind like a candle in the wind. One evening, as you pour ale for a passing merchant, he says, funny thing about widows, they often end up richer than before. He laughs. You smile politely, but inside, you think, only the ones who learn how to disappear. You walk him to the door. Outside, the sky bleeds orange into blue. And for the first time in weeks, you don't feel small, you feel invisible, and that, in this world, might be your greatest strength. Historians still debate whether medieval widows truly lost everything, or if many quietly reshaped their fates through cunning and patience. Some records suggest that the poorest women managed to outlast even the laws meant to suppress them. You place the key back in your pocket. Its weight feels different now, not as a burden, but as a reminder. You may have been written out of your husband's story, but that only means it's time to write your own. And tonight, beneath the quiet hum of the hearth, you begin. The church bells wake you the next morning, low, deliberate, and impossibly loud for such a sleepy village. They echo through the valley like a command from heaven itself. You pull the blanket tighter, but you know what they mean. Attendance is not optional. By mid-morning, you're walking down the dirt path, veil in place, heart already weary. The church sits like a stern old judge at the edge of the village, whitewashed walls streaked with rain. A single wooden cross leaning slightly at the top. Inside, the air smells of wax, stone, and something faintly metallic, incense and iron mixed together. The priest stands near the altar, hands clasped, eyes sharp. He smiles when he sees you. But it's the kind of smile that weighs more than it comforts. Ah, our faithful widow, he says softly, his voice echoing in the vaulted room. You've been in my prayers. You nod, because that's what you're supposed to do. The pews creak as you sit down. Behind you, whispers slither through the air, people talking about your attendance, your veil, your posture. Everything about you is a public act now. The sermon begins, and the priest's words fall like stones. Obedience, virtue, submission. He speaks about Eve, about temptation, about how widows must remain vigilant against the devil's whispers. You almost smile, as if the devil has nothing better to do than visit a cold cottage with no food and a leaky roof. He quotes from Scripture. A woman left to her own devices is like an untended field, it grows weeds. The congregation murmurs in approval. You keep your head low. But inside, your thoughts are loud. If only weeds could pay rent. You think, you'd be the richest woman in the village. When the mass ends, he calls you aside. You're holding up well, he says. But remember, the Lord loves a humble heart. Pride leads to sin, and sin leads to ruin. You nod again, but you can't help noticing the way his eyes linger. Not lustfully, though that's happened to others, but watchfully. Like a shepherd guarding a sheep he doesn't trust not to stray. Outside, you breathe deeply. The cold air tastes freer than anything inside those walls. You watch the villagers disperse, couples walking arm in arm, families herding children, old men gossiping about tithes and weather. And then there's you, one silhouette among them, yet apart. The church claims to guide widows toward purity. In reality, it watches them like hawks. Too quiet, and you're called melancholy. Too talkative, and you're accused of gossip. Too happy, and they whisper of demons. No one ever asks how a woman might actually feel, as if emotion itself were indecent. Back home, you light the small candle on your table, your own kind of ritual. It flickers weakly against the draft, the flame trembling but alive. You find comfort in that. Later that day, a knock comes at your door. It's Sister Agnes, one of the nuns from the convent nearby. Her smile is kind, genuine in a way few things are these days. We've been praying for you, she says, if you ever need guidance. The convent is open. You thank her, and she leaves a small loaf of bread before departing. You tear into it the moment she's gone. Hunger doesn't wait for holiness. As you eat, you think about her words, guidance. The convent offers shelter, safety, purpose, but it also means vows. Obedience, a lifetime of rules dictated by men cloaked in piety. You've seen widows disappear into monasteries before, women who gave up not only the world, but themselves. They became shadows behind stone walls, praying from dawn till dusk, until even their names were forgotten. To some, that's peace. To you, it sounds like another kind of grave. That night, you kneel by your bedside. As expected, you whisper the prayers the priest drilled into every soul, Pater Noster, Ave Maria, but then, after the last Amen, you add your own, a prayer not to saints or angels, but to yourself. Let me survive this, you murmur. Let me stay unseen until it's safe to be seen. The candlelight trembles, as if answering. Over the following weeks, you start noticing patterns. The church takes note of which widows attend Mass most faithfully. Those women often receive help, bread, cloth, a few coins, but there's always a cost. The priest asks them to help clean, to run errands, to serve God through service. And sometimes, that service stretches late into the evening. Rumors travel faster than Scripture. You hear whispers about one widow, younger than you, prettier, lonelier. She's been visiting the rectory often. People say, she insists it's for confession. You wonder what sins she could possibly have left to confess. The church's gaze is constant. But it's not all powerful. Sometimes, it misses things, like the way you barter quietly after services, trading herbs for candles with the washerwoman, or how you slip out before evening prayers, walking home through the woods where the bell can't reach. In those moments, you feel free, almost invisible. The branches rustle like soft applause. You catch the scent of pine and wet earth. And for a heartbeat, you're not a widow. You're just a person walking through the world again. Historians still debate whether the church offered widows true compassion or merely control. Some argue it gave them structure in chaos. Others say it caged them beneath the guise of salvation. Perhaps both are true. As you reach home, the moon has risen, pale and watchful. Much like the priest, but unlike him, it demands nothing. You sit by the window, veil cast aside, and let its cold light touch your face. You whisper one last line to the night, "You can watch me, but you'll never own me." And for the first time, the silence feels like an ally. The days begin to blend, each one stitched to the next by the same dull rhythm, the sound of the bell, the scrape of the broom, the sigh of the wind through broken shutters. You count time not in hours, but in chores. Wash, patch, pray, repeat. And then one afternoon, as you sit by the window mending a torn sleeve, a visitor arrives, a woman, wrapped in gray wool, her hair streaked with silver and her eyes sharp as glass. You know her by reputation, Mistress Elspeth, a widow for nearly 20 years. The villagers call her the chaste one, though you've heard other names whispered too, the cold one, the cunning one, the survivor. She doesn't knock, she simply steps inside and says, "You need to eat." Then she sets down a small basket on your table. Inside, a round of cheese, a loaf of barley bread, and a flask that smells faintly of wine. You thank her, cautiously. She waves it off. "Don't thank me," she says. "Thank yourself. You've lasted a month. That's longer than most do before they break." Her voice is dry but kind. Her humor worn smooth by years of use. You pour 2 cups of the wine and sit across from her. The taste is thin, sour, but warm, the kind of drink that makes silence easier to share. She studies you for a while before speaking again. "They'll tell you to stay pure," she says. "They'll say chastity is your shield. But that shield is double-edged. It keeps you safe, yes, but it also keeps you alone." You listen, unsure whether she's warning you or testing you. Elspeth leans closer. "Do you know why they care so much about what you do with your body?" she asks. "Because it's the one thing they can't own without your permission." You almost choke on the wine. She laughs softly, a sound like parchment folding. "Don't look so shocked. I was young once too. The church calls it sin. But sin is just freedom with a bad reputation." She stays until dusk, sharing small truths wrapped in riddles. She tells you how widows are often approached with offers, men who pretend to help but really just want your bed, your goats, or your silence. She warns that the same priest who blesses you on Sunday will condemn you on Monday if he catches you laughing with the wrong man. When she leaves, you feel something you haven't in weeks, curiosity. That night, as the wind claws at the shutters, you think about her words, chastity, sin, freedom. You were raised to believe purity was power. But here, it feels like a chain, a rule written by people who'll never have to live under it. The next morning, You decide to test the edge of that chain. You skip Mass. Just once. Instead, you walk down to the stream outside the village. Veil off. Hair unbound. The air is sharp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and thawing soil. You roll up your sleeves and wash your hands in the cold water. It burns, but in a way that feels honest. For the first time, you see your reflection clearly, not the dutiful widow, not the obedient figure wrapped in black, but a woman, just a woman. The thought makes you laugh. Quietly. If anyone saw you now, they'd call it scandalous, laughing alone. Unveiled, unrepentant. When you return, no one seems to notice your absence. Or maybe they do, but they choose silence. That's the trick with gossip. It often takes a few days to bloom. By evening, you hear the first murmur. She missed the service. Someone whispers at the well. Perhaps she's ill. Another replies. Perhaps she's straying, says a third. The last one laughs. You keep walking, carrying your water bucket, pretending not to hear. At home, you sit by the fire and think about the strange arithmetic of morality. A man can drink, gamble, even keep a mistress, and still be called respectable. A widow skips one sermon, and she becomes a story. You start to notice small hypocrisies everywhere. The priest preaching humility while his table groans with meat. The steward condemning vanity while polishing his rings. Even Sister Agnes, kind as she is, speaks often of self-denial while wearing a silver cross heavy enough to feed a family. You wonder if virtue is just another luxury, something only the comfortable can afford. That night, as you lie in bed, you hear a soft knock on your door. You freeze. No one visits after dark. You slip quietly from under the blanket, candle in hand, and open the door a crack. It's Elspeth again, her cloak damp from the mist. They'll start watching you, she says simply, now that you've stopped pretending. Be careful. You nod, heart pounding. Why tell me this? She smiles faintly. Because someone once told me. And I didn't listen soon enough. Then she's gone, swallowed by the night. You close the door, bolt it, and lean against the wood. The candle flickers wildly, throwing your shadow across the room, tall, defiant, unbowed. Historians still debate whether widows' vows of chastity were acts of devotion or social control. Some saw them as spiritual strength, others as enforced silence disguised as holiness. You blow out the candle and let the darkness settle. Somewhere, a dog barks. The wind hums against the roof like a lullaby. You whisper into the quiet. I'll stay unseen, but not undone. And in the blackness, you almost think you hear Elspeth's laughter, carried softly by the wind. Winter arrives with the stealth of a thief. One morning, the frost just appears, coating the thatched roofs and cobblestones in white armor. The fields stand empty, the river stiff with ice, and every breath you take leaves a small cloud that vanishes too quickly. Just like warmth, or kindness. You wake before dawn. The air in the cottage is sharp enough to sting your lungs. The fire has died, and the small pile of logs beside the hearth is nearly gone. You wrap yourself in every scrap of fabric you own, wool, linen, even an old curtain, and still, it isn't enough. Hunger gnaws too. The bread ran out yesterday. This is what they don't write about in sermons, how grief and hunger share the same shape. Both hollow you out from the inside. You step outside. the snow crunching under your bare boots. The sky is pale and distant, like a ceiling painted by a cruel god. You make your way to the village square. A handful of people are there, clutching baskets and small hopes. The baker's door is shut tight. The smell of bread has become a kind of taunt. Mistress Elspeth stands near the well, her face wrapped in fur. The steward says the grain stores are low. She murmurs, "He'll ration what's left to the families first." You look at her, understanding instantly. Families, you're not one anymore. Widows are not counted in the arithmetic of survival. The steward arrives, his breath puffing in pompous clouds. By order of the Lord, he says, the stores will be distributed to those with dependents. The rest must trust in God's mercy. You almost laugh. God's mercy is the thinnest soup in the world. When your turn comes, he glances at your empty hands, then shakes his head. Next. You stand there for a moment, heat rising beneath the cold. Behind you, someone whispers, "A widow's share is heaven's concern." The others nod, pretending that saying so makes them righteous. You walk away before they see the tremor in your jaw. By afternoon, the hunger sharpens into something like clarity. You remember a patch of forest beyond the frozen stream, where roots grow beneath the snow if you know where to dig. You grab a small knife and head there, ignoring the priest's warning about wandering women. The forest doesn't judge, it only tests. The snow muffles sound, turning your footsteps into whispers. You dig through the hard crust of frost, fingers numb, until you strike something, not treasure, not hope, but turnips, misshapen, frozen, but edible. You pull them out one by one, your breath coming in ragged bursts. You look up at the trees, their branches black against the pale sky. For a moment, you imagine them bending down like old guardians, watching quietly as you steal from the earth itself. "Don't worry," you murmur, "I'll put it back in spring." By the time you return, your hands are raw and your feet feel like stones. You light a small fire and roast the turnips. The smell fills the cottage, faint and smoky, but comforting. You eat slowly, reverently, as if performing a sacred rite. Hunger teaches worship better than any priest. That night, you dream of feasts, roasted goose, soft bread, honeyed ale. You wake to find the candle still burning low. The dream leaves you smiling, though, because in it, you were laughing again. The next few days blur together. The cold worsens. The village shrinks inward. Smoke curls from fewer chimneys each morning. You see less of the priest now. Perhaps even piety freezes at a certain temperature. Elspeth visits again. Her cheeks are flushed with cold, but her eyes burn bright. "You're managing," she says approvingly. "Good. Some can't. The widow down by the mill died 2 nights ago, froze in her sleep." You feel the words like a slap. The mill widow was young, kind, and hopelessly devout. She had prayed for warmth instead of seeking it. That evening, you wrap your blanket tighter and whisper to the empty room, "I'll pray too," but while walking. A week later, the steward's wife falls ill. Suddenly, the same people who ignored you are knocking at your door, asking for herbs. They say you know remedies. One says shyly, you almost tell her no. But then you remember. Survival isn't just about eating, it's about being needed. You brew a weak tea from what you've gathered: pine needles, bark, a pinch of dried thyme, and hand it to her. She calls you kind. You call it commerce. By the end of the week, word spreads. The widow knows healing. You don't correct them. The truth is simpler. You just listen to the old women and remember what works. But in this winter, perception matters more than truth. One evening, you even find a loaf left at your doorstep. No note, no explanation. You smile. Fear turns quickly to respect when people think you might save their lives. Still, the hunger never fully leaves. It becomes a companion, one that keeps you humble, awake, and sharp. Historians still debate whether widows in medieval villages were victims or survivors during harsh winters. Many accounts describe them dying quietly, but others hint at women who outlasted entire families by wit alone. You sit by your fire that night, sipping the last of your tea. The room smells of smoke and pine. Outside, snow falls again, relentless but soft, like silence made visible. You close your eyes, feeling the warmth on your face. You whisper into the glow, "I'm still here." And for a moment, even the wind seems to pause, as if listening. By the time spring finally dares to show its face, the village has changed. The frost melts into mud, the mud into puddles, and suddenly everything smells of wet earth and old secrets. The snow that once silenced the world now gives way to the sound of shovels, hammers, and gossip. You survived the winter, barely. But you did, and in the Middle Ages, survival is a kind of rebellion. The sun feels strange on your skin, almost intrusive. You walk through the village, veil pushed back, and you can feel eyes following you. Some look surprised you're still alive, others disappointed. Death, after all, is tidier than defiance. Your hands are rough from work, your nails dark with soil. But there's color in your cheeks again. You've begun to trade small goods, herbs, salves, mended cloth. It's not much, but it's yours. When people knock on your door now, they do it politely. One day, a young woman approaches, hesitant. You recognize her, the blacksmith's wife, with a newborn strapped to her chest. "Mistress," she says quietly, "they told me you have something for milk fever." You do. You hand her a jar of crushed mint and bark. Tell her how to brew it. She insists on paying, pressing a copper coin into your hand. You feel the cool metal. And for a moment, it's like touching independence. That night, you sit by the fire counting your small hoard, 5 copper coins, a few pins, and 2 candles. Not much, but it feels like a fortune compared to the emptiness of winter. Still, there's danger in doing too well. By the second week of spring, whispers start again. They say you've been busy. They say the herbs you sell come from the forest witches. They say your tea does more than heal, that it tempts. It's the same pattern you've seen before, when a man prospers. It's God's blessing when a woman survives. It's suspicious. You keep your head down. But Elspeth notices. She always does. She visits one evening, chewing on a dried apple and watching you stir a pot of salve. You've got their attention, she says simply. That's never a gift. You sigh. So what should I do? Starve quietly? She smiles faintly. Oh no. Just remember the rule. If they call you strange, be useful. If they call you dangerous, be necessary. Her words stay with you. The next morning, you hear the bell tolling. Someone has died. It's the miller's son, struck by fever. The priest preaches about divine punishment. But people still line up at your door asking for anything that might help the living. You don't turn them away. You hand out herbs, prayers, and comfort. By evening, your table is empty but your name is not. They whisper less now, or at least, not within earshot. You go to bed exhausted. Your fingers stained green from grinding leaves. You dream of fields, of hands reaching through the soil, not to grab you, but to thank you. A few days later, you find a small bundle left on your doorstep: bread, cheese, and a piece of cloth embroidered with a single symbol, a sprig of rosemary. It's a quiet message. Someone out there believes in you. Yet not everyone is so kind. One afternoon, as you walk through the market, a group of boys follows you, snickering. Which one calls? She talks to plants, another laughs. You ignore them, but the sting lingers. Then, from a nearby stall, a butcher shouts, "Leave her be. She saved my wife last winter." The boys scatter. You nod your thanks, though your heart beats too fast. When you return home, you notice something strange: a small figure carved from wood, left on your windowsill, a woman with a veil, holding a flame. You've seen such charms before, protective talismans. You smile and leave it there. Let the neighbors think you're powerful. Fear is safer than pity. Night falls, and the moonlight drapes your cottage in silver. You sit by the fire, writing with a piece of charcoal on scrap parchment, keeping records of your trades, your herbs, your prices. It feels dangerous, this act of literacy. The church discourages women from writing, claiming it invites temptation. You almost laugh. If knowledge is temptation, you've already sinned 100 times. As you write, you hear Elspeth's voice in your head: be necessary. So you keep working, learning, helping, quietly. Historians still debate whether medieval widows who practiced healing were early herbalists or victims of superstition. Some accounts describe them as saints, others as witches. Most likely, they were both, depending on who was watching. You put down the charcoal and stretch your hands toward the fire. The warmth feels earned this time. The kind of warmth that doesn't just happen, you make it. Outside, the frogs begin their chorus, the sound rising and falling like a song older than scripture. You smile softly and whisper, "Let them call me what they wish. At least they'll remember my name." And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolls, not a warning, but a promise. By midsummer, the village hums again. Fields shimmer gold beneath the sun and the air smells of sweat, hay, and distant rain. The worst of the hunger is gone, replaced by harvest chatter and the clatter of carts. To most, this is a season of renewal. But for you, for widows, it's also the season of markets. You sling your small basket over your arm, filled with dried herbs, a few vials of ointment, and a handful of hope. The widows' market gathers every second Thursday just beyond the church square, far enough from the main stalls to keep the respectable merchants comfortable, but close enough to ensure the curious can still wander over. It's not an official market, of course. No lord or priest acknowledges it, but everyone knows it exists. A quiet corner where women without men exchange what the world refuses to pay for. You see Elspeth there, seated behind a small table stacked with candles and dried lavender. She nods as you approach, her face glowing in the sunlight like old parchment touched with gold. You made it, she says, sliding a small loaf your way. Welcome to the society of the unwanted. You laugh softly. We sound like a guild. In a way, she says, except our patron saint is survival. The market buzzes with quiet energy. Widows barter over wool, bread, scraps of cloth, gossip, and sometimes secrets. One sells charms against bad luck, bits of string, bones, and faith mixed together. Another exchanges healing teas for eggs. There's laughter here, too, low and careful, as if joy must sneak out between sentences. You find your small patch of shade and set out your herbs. Within minutes, women drift over. A shepherd's wife asks for something to ease her husband's cough. A young girl whispers that she needs something to make her stop crying at night. You listen, nod, hand over small packets wrapped in paper. When coins change hands, you feel a quiet pride. Not greed, just proof you can still trade with the living. Across the lane, two young men pass, carrying barrels of ale. One of them glances at you and smirks. Which market? He mutters to the other. You meet his gaze directly. And he looks away first. There's power in not flinching. Around noon, Elspeth leans over. Be careful who you sell to. Some will praise you for healing them, then curse you for knowing how. You nod, and if I stop? Then they'll forget you, she replies, and forgetting can kill you faster than fear. A sudden breeze stirs the stalls, carrying the scent of rosemary and sweat. The sound of laughter ripples through the group. Someone has told a scandalous story about a nobleman's widow who remarried her husband's brother before the mourning year ended. You can't help smiling. Bold woman, you say. Foolish, Elspeth replies, but at least she got warm again before winter. The day passes gently. By sunset, you've sold most of your wares. You share a cup of ale with the others, the taste sour but celebratory. For a moment, you forget you're supposed to be sad. As the market closes, the widows linger. No one rushes home. Most don't have anyone waiting. Instead, you exchange small pieces of advice. Which tax collector can be bribed with bread? Which steward ignores unpaid rents if flattered? It's not just trade, it's survival school. Whispered in plain sight. Elspeth walks with you partway back to the village. The air cools as twilight settles. Fireflies flickering like candle sparks between the trees. You did well today, she says. You'll last. You glance at her. Is that what we're doing? Lasting? She smiles faintly. For now. Later. Maybe living. You reach your cottage and thank her. Before leaving, she presses something into your palm, a small silver coin. Worn and faintly warm. Keep it, she says, not for spending, for remembering that you earned it. After she leaves, you sit by your window, holding the coin to the moonlight. Its faint shine feels like defiance. You tuck it into your husband's old lockbox, next to his note and the key. A quiet shrine to what's gone and what's growing. Outside, the crickets sing, and from somewhere far away comes the muffled laughter of villagers drinking by the tavern fire. You listen, smiling. There was a time when that sound made you ache. Now it just feels like part of the world, a world you're still in. Historians still debate whether widows' markets truly existed or if they were romanticized later as symbols of quiet female solidarity. Yet letters and ledgers hint at gatherings just like this, small circles where women traded goods, news, and courage. You stretch your hands toward the open window. The air smells of damp grass and wood smoke. You whisper to the unwanted guild and laugh softly to yourself. Then, in the faint wind, you swear you hear other voices answering, hundreds of women, across villages and centuries, all laughing quietly back. By autumn, the air tastes of ash and apple skin. The fields shimmer in fading gold, and smoke rises from every cottage chimney, a sure sign that the season of journeys has begun. For most, it means trading or harvest festivals. For you, it means pilgrimage. It starts with a dream. You wake one night to the sound of bells. Though none are ringing, in the dream, you stood on a long road bordered by trees. Your husband's old walking stick in hand. A voice, his, maybe, whispered, "Keep walking until it feels like forgiveness." When you tell Elspeth, she snorts. Dreams are what hunger uses to keep us amused. She says, but Marjorie looks thoughtful. Perhaps it's time, she murmurs. A pilgrimage can cleanse sins, real or imagined. And it gives people less reason to fear you. A pious widow is easier to stomach than a clever one. You consider this. The truth is, you've grown restless. The village feels too small now. The same gossip looping like a song with too few notes. Maybe walking away isn't escape. Maybe it's renewal. So you prepare. You pack what little you own, a crust of bread, a flask of water, a few coins, and your husband's letter. Elspeth gives you a wool cloak for warmth. She says gruffly, though her eyes soften. Marjorie presses a silver brooch into your hand. Wear it openly, she says. Pilgrims are prey without proof of patronage. You leave at dawn. The road stretches ahead like an unwritten page. Mist curling low across the fields. The air smells of wet stone and distant wood smoke. Your boots crunch softly on the dirt. Each step feels both heavy and freeing, as if the weight you've carried for years is slowly rearranging itself into motion. Pilgrimage, they say, is a journey for the soul. In truth, it's mostly for the body, the blisters, the cold, the aching shoulders. But pain has its rhythm. And after a while, walking becomes its own kind of prayer. You pass through other villages. Some faces are kind, offering bread and shelter. Others turn away, muttering, "Widow," as though it's a warning. You sleep in barns, under hedges, beside rivers. At night, you talk quietly to your husband, not because you expect an answer, but because silence demands a voice to share it. On the fifth day, you meet another pilgrim, a man with gray hair and a limp. He carries a wooden cross tied to his back with rope. When he learns your destination, the shrine at St. Osyth's Abbey, he smiles. They say her bones glow faintly at night. He says, "You arch an eyebrow. Bones don't glow." He chuckles. Neither do saints. Yet people see them everywhere. Faith is just hope with better lighting. You laugh, genuinely. The sound startling in your own ears. The two of you walk together for a while, trading stories. He tells you he once owned a small vineyard before a fire took everything. You tell him about your cottage, your herbs, the trial. He listens quietly, then says, "You're braver than you think." When you part ways at the crossroads, he presses a carved token into your hand, a small circle of wood marked with a simple cross. "Keep it," he says, "for luck, or memory." By the seventh day, Your feet bleed. You rest beside a stream, washing them gently, then watching the ripples distort your reflection. You look older, but not defeated. The veil has long since been tucked away, a shroud you no longer need. Finally, you reach St. Osyth's Abbey. It's smaller than you imagined, a modest stone chapel surrounded by wildflowers and a crumbling wall. A young nun greets you. Eyes kind, hands rough from work. You've come far, she says. You nod, farther than I meant to. She offers you water, then guides you inside. The chapel smells of beeswax and lilies. Candles flicker in uneven rows. You kneel before the altar, unsure what to say. What could you ask for that hasn't already been taken or learned the hard way? Instead of prayer, you whisper gratitude for survival, for small mercies, for the chance to walk away and still return to yourself. You light a single candle and watch the wax melt slowly, tracing a path down the brass stand like a tear that refuses to fall. For all widows, you murmur, the living and the forgotten. The nun hears you and smiles. A generous offering, she says softly. Most pray only for themselves. You stay the night in a small cell behind the chapel. The straw bed scratches, but it's dry. The wind outside hums through the stone cracks like a lullaby. You fall asleep thinking not of loss, but of roads, of all the unseen paths women like you must walk to keep existing. At dawn, the nun gives you a small loaf and a blessing. You carry peace in your eyes. She says, "Maybe it's just exhaustion." You answer, "Exhaustion is peace," she says with a grin. On the journey home, the world feels different, not kinder, but quieter, as if the land itself has exhaled. You pass the same river, the same trees, but they no longer look like boundaries. They look like witnesses. Historians still debate whether medieval widows went on pilgrimages for faith or survival. Many records suggest both. For some, it was devotion; for others, it was the only way to travel without question, to move freely under the protection of a holy excuse. When you finally see the roof of your cottage again, dusk is falling, the chimney leans slightly, smoke curling up like a familiar hand. You smile. The journey didn't change who you are. It reminded you that you still have somewhere to return to. You step inside, set the brooch and token on the table, and whisper to the empty room, "I walked until it felt like forgiveness. You were right." Then you light a candle of your own and let its flame speak for you, steady, small, and unafraid. The weeks after your return unfold gently, like pages turned by a breeze. You had expected the same old village gossip, the same glances, the same cautious smiles, but something subtle has changed. When people speak to you now, there's less pity, less suspicion. Perhaps it's because you left and came back. In this world, surviving a journey earns respect, even if no one says it aloud. The convent's quiet seems to have followed you home. Each morning, you wake to birdsong instead of dread. You brew tea from the herbs hanging above your hearth, mint, sage, and something new the nun gave you. For calmness, she said, you don't ask what it is. Some gifts don't need names. Word spreads quickly that you've returned from pilgrimage. The priest even mentions it in his sermon, calling you a humble example of feminine devotion. You almost laugh out loud at that. But instead, you bow your head like a proper penitent. Let them believe what they wish. Faith makes people comfortable. and comfort makes them harmless. A few days later, Sister Agnes visits from the convent. Her hands are red from work. Her smile warm as candlelight. "It's good to see you back," she says. "I was afraid the road might claim you." "It tried," you reply, "but I had a stubborn guide." You tell her about the man with the wooden cross, the abbey, the candle you lit for the widows of the world. She listens closely, nodding. "You've found peace," she says. You think about that for a moment. "No," you answer softly. "I've found balance. Peace still feels too much like forgetting." She understands. Before leaving, she offers you a suggestion. "We have room in the convent garden. You could stay with us for a while, help with the herbs. Teach the younger sisters what you know." You thank her, but you don't promise. You've lived behind too many walls already. Still, the idea lingers like the scent of lavender. That evening, Elspeth stops by. "They'll want you to take vows," she warns. "Sitting by your fire. It's how the church keeps useful women under control." You smile faintly. "And how did they fail to keep you?" "I never looked pious long enough." She grins. You share bread and talk long into the night. She tells you stories of other widows, some who vanished into abbeys, some who remarried for safety, others who simply disappeared. "We don't get monuments," she says, "but we get each other." You nod. That's enough. Days pass, and you begin visiting the convent regularly. You show the nuns how to dry herbs properly, how to boil nettles without bitterness, how to make poultices that actually heal instead of just smell holy. They listen eagerly, scribbling notes on scraps of parchment. For the first time in years, you teach openly without fear. In return, they give you small gifts: bread, wool, candles. One even gives you a rosary carved from rosewood. You keep it, though your prayers still sound more like conversations than confessions. But not everyone approves. The priest watches you carefully now. You can feel his gaze during Mass. Heavy as a chain. To him, a widow who teaches is only a step away from a woman who leads, and that, to men like him, is heresy. He summons you one afternoon. His tone sweet but sharp. "Your visits to the convent have caused talk," he says. "Some say you're overstepping your place." You fold your hands politely. "Then perhaps they should find better things to talk about." He frowns. "Pride is dangerous, widow." "So is ignorance," you reply. For a moment, silence stretches between you like a drawn bowstring. Then he sighs and says, "You've been given much freedom. Don't mistake it for blessing." When you leave, the sun is setting, soft gold bleeding into violet. You walk home slowly, your shadow long against the road. His words should frighten you. But they don't. They remind you instead of something Elspeth once said: "Fear is how they measure obedience." You decide not to measure anymore. From then on, you spend half your time at the convent and half at your cottage. You work quietly, helping the sisters build a small garden behind the chapel. Together you plant rosemary, thyme, and mint, and in one corner, hidden from view, you place a small wooden charm: the veiled woman with the flame. "Who's she?" asks one of the younger nuns. "An old friend," you say. "She watches over women who keep the light burning." At dusk, you and the sisters gather in the garden to pray. But your prayers have changed. They no longer ask for forgiveness or deliverance. They ask for endurance, for gentleness, for wisdom that doesn't need permission. Historians still debate whether widows who entered convent life did so willingly or under pressure. Some found purpose in the rhythm of prayer. Others found another kind of prison. Softer but no less confining. What's certain is that many brought with them knowledge the church could not suppress: medicine, midwifery, and the quiet defiance of survival. One night, as you walk home from the convent, the stars are clear enough to see the Milky Way spilling across the sky like scattered salt. You pause on the hill overlooking the village, the roofs, the river, the fields glowing faintly under moonlight. For the first time, it all feels small, and you realize that's a comfort, not a loss. You whisper into the cool air, "If peace ever finds me, I'll meet it halfway." Then you pull your cloak tighter and walk down the hill, the faint scent of herbs clinging to your hands, your footsteps echoing softly like a prayer written in motion. By the time winter's first chill curls under the door again, you've learned that even peace has its rebellions. The convent garden now grows strong, rows of green defying the frost, and word has spread beyond the village that the herb women of St. Osyth's know how to cure fevers, ease births, and calm sleepless minds. But whispers, like weeds, always return. It begins with something small. A visiting friar praises the sister's skill in his sermon, then adds, "Of course, we must be wary that holy knowledge does not turn into prideful witchery." You can almost hear the smile beneath his words. The nuns glance at you when he says it. You only raise an eyebrow and keep sorting mint. Later that week, the friar visits the garden. He's young, with sharp eyes and the confidence of someone who believes God personally approves his opinions. "You are the widow who teaches herbs?" he asks. "I am," you reply, without stopping your work. He watches your hands move through the leaves. "Fascinating, so many remedies, yet you don't wear the veil." "I did once," you say evenly. "It didn't help the plants grow." His smile falters. "You should be careful, mistress. Healing can look like magic to those who don't understand it." You glance up. Then perhaps the church should try harder to understand. He leaves soon after, muttering something about temptation in humble places. When you tell Elspeth, she bursts out laughing. "If the friar's afraid of herbs, we should make him a potion for courage." But beneath her humor lies worry. "They've started watching again," she says. "Too many widows with too much sense make the priests nervous." You shrug. "Let them talk. The garden still grows." Still, the unease lingers. One evening, Sister Agnes confides in you. "They want us to stop selling remedies outside the village," she says. "The abbot sent a letter. He says it draws the wrong kind of attention." "The sick kind?" you ask. "The female kind," she replies quietly. You both laugh, though it's not funny. Soon after, a messenger arrives from the manor. Lady Marjorie has summoned you. You walk there through the early snow, the path lined with bare trees like thin, accusing fingers. Inside the great hall, fire roars and servants bustle. But Marjorie sits apart, pale and tired. "You look unwell," you say, taking her hand. "Unwell is fashionable among widows." She murmurs with a faint smile. Then her expression hardens. "They've come for me, too. The steward's allies have found a clause in the estate law. They want the manor returned to the crown." A woman cannot hold it without male kin, they say. You feel a cold fury bloom beneath your ribs. So they would leave you homeless to protect their pride? Not homeless, she says bitterly. They've offered marriage to the steward's cousin. Your silence says everything. Marjorie looks at you, her eyes bright despite exhaustion. If I must yield, I will yield on my own terms. But I'll not wear obedience like perfume. You squeeze her hand. Then you won't. I'll stand with you. Against the manor? Against forgetting ourselves. You answer. You return home that night to find Elspeth waiting. Snow dusts her shoulders like ash. The convent sent word, she says. The friar's report has reached the bishop. He's sending a representative to inspect the garden. You sit down heavily. Inspect. You repeat. That's a polite word for accuse. Elspeth nods. They'll want a confession, not of guilt, but of humility. You stare into the fire. Then I'll give them neither. That night, sleep won't come. You sit by the window. The moonlight painting the floor in cold silver. You think of Marjorie's defiance, of the sisters' fear, of every widow who ever learned to live between worship and survival. You whisper to the darkness. If they want repentance, they can find it in the mirror. In the morning, the bishop's man arrives. He's older than the friar but colder. His eyes pale as candle wax. He examines the garden, the herbs, the mortar and pestle. Too much knowledge for simple women. He says, you fold your hands. Knowledge doesn't ask who holds it. He looks at you for a long moment. You've read, haven't you? Scriptures, letters, perhaps things not meant for your eyes. Everything written, you say quietly, was meant for someone's eyes. I only borrowed mine. He almost smiles, almost. You speak dangerously. Widow. I've lived dangerously. You reply, speaking is easier. In the end, he declares the garden acceptable under supervision. He warns that all remedies must be approved by the church. He leaves with 2 jars of salve and the satisfaction of a man who believes he's tamed something wild. When he's gone, the sisters exhale. One of them begins to cry quietly. You place a hand on her shoulder. Don't weep, you say. He took our herbs. He didn't take the roots. Historians still debate how deeply the church regulated women's healing practices. Some records show bishops issuing warnings against immodest medicine, while others suggest that monasteries relied heavily on female healers they officially condemned. That night, you dig your hands into the soil of the garden. The earth is cold, but alive. You bury a small pouch there, inside. A few seeds, a lock of your husband's hair, and one of your hidden letters. You whisper, grow, even if they don't see you. The wind stirs the branches in answer. And for the first time in weeks, you feel something close to hope. Not safety, never that, but the quiet, unkillable kind of hope that takes root underground. Waiting for spring, the first snow has settled thick and bright over the village roofs. Each breath you take turns into a pale cloud that drifts upward. As if the air itself is tired. The world looks peaceful, but peace, you've learned, can be deceitful. Beneath its calm, there's always something waiting to stir. This morning, you hear it before you see it. Faint music floating from the square. A chorus of laughter carried by wind. The traveling minstrels have come again. Their songs pull the villagers like moths to flame. Even the priest, who normally condemns music not written for God, stands by the door pretending he's merely observing. You walk closer, keeping to the edge of the crowd. The performers wear bright rags stitched from many lives, red, green, gold. Their fiddles sing of love, of fortune, of folly. And then, in between the tunes, a woman's voice rises. Her song is low, haunting, almost prayer-like. She waits by the window, her fire grown cold. Her hands are her kingdom, her stories untold. They call her a sinner. They call her untrue. But the night knows her name, and it whispers it too. The villagers listen, spellbound. Some look uneasy. You feel something shift inside you. A recognition so sharp it almost hurts. The singer catches your gaze. Her hair is streaked with silver. Her eyes bright with mischief and grief combined. When the song ends, she nods to you as though you share a secret. After the crowd disperses, you find her near the well, drinking from a wooden cup. That song, you say softly, it's about a widow. She grins. It's about every woman who outlives her usefulness. You laugh, startled. You sing what most only whisper. That's why I travel, she replies. Whispers can't catch me. Her name is Elena, and she's been on the road for years. She sings stories the priests won't write down, of abandoned brides who became healers, of widows who built their own homes from ashes. The church says we sing lies. She says, but what they mean is that our truths don't serve them. You walk with her through the snow, the two of you leaving twin trails of prints. Once, she says, there were songs about widows who ruled villages while their men fought in wars. They ran farms, collected taxes, even held court. Then the men came home, and the songs changed. Forgotten, you ask? Rewritten, she corrects. History has an eraser for every woman it fears. That night, you invite her to your cottage. The fire glows, and for the first time in a long while, the air hums with laughter. Elena plays her lute softly, a tune like falling snow. She hums as she tunes the strings. You should come with me, she says. You have stories worth singing. You shake your head. My roots are here. She smiles. Then let them bloom louder. When she leaves the next morning, she presses something into your hand, a small scrap of parchment with a single line written in uneven ink. A woman's silence is the anthem of fear. Sing anyway. You fold it carefully and slip it inside the chest with your letters. That same day, you hear her song echoing faintly down the road as she disappears over the hill. You hum it under your breath while tending the garden. And to your surprise, one of the younger nuns joins in. Soon, the melody drifts from cottage to convent, soft but steady. By week's end, even children are singing it. They don't know who wrote it, or what it means, but they like the rhythm, the way it feels rebellious without understanding why. The priest, of course, notices. In Sunday's sermon, he warns against ungodly songs that glorify disobedience. The congregation nods solemnly, then hums the tune on their walk home. You can't help but laugh. Music spreads faster than fear. One evening, Lady Marjorie sends a note. The steward's cousin has withdrawn his proposal, apparently. She lacks the proper humility. You grin at the phrasing. When you visit her, she's radiant with relief. Imagine, she says, being spared by arrogance. The two of you talk late into the night. She tells you she's begun quietly managing her estate's accounts, teaching herself what the men think she can't know. You share news of the garden, the friar's inspection, the song that refuses to die. Widows, she says, raising her cup, the most dangerous choir of all. You laugh, and the sound feels like a match struck in the dark. Days pass, then weeks, snow deepens, but the village feels strangely alive. People come to your cottage not just for herbs now, but for words, for counsel. They bring their doubts, their grief, their small rebellions. You listen, guide, sometimes tease. Don't mistake survival for sin. You tell them, it's just a louder kind of prayer. One night, as you sit by the fire, you hear faint singing outside, the widow's song. You open the door, and there stand 3 village girls. No older than 12, grinning shyly. We learned it from the travelers. One says, "Is it true, what it means?" You nod, yes. You whisper, "It means you're allowed to exist." Historians still debate whether folk songs about widows carried hidden messages of resistance. Some argue they were cautionary tales. Others believe they were quiet revolutions disguised as lullabies. Either way, they survived when most written laws did not. That night, you lie in bed and listen to the wind. Somewhere far off, you imagine Elena singing by another fire, her voice threading through the cold. You smile, because now the story isn't just yours, it's theirs too. You whisper to the darkness, "They called me silent, but I was only listening for the right moment to begin." And somewhere in the distance, faint and fearless, the song begins again. The thaw comes late that year. But when it does, it feels like a release. The snow retreats in streaks across the hills, leaving behind rivers of mud and the first brave shoots of green. The village begins to stretch itself awake, carts creaking, hammers echoing, laughter returning cautiously after months of cold silence. You step outside one morning, the smell of damp soil filling your lungs. The earth feels alive again. You crouch to touch the new grass, damp and stubborn, and for the first time in a long time, you allow yourself to imagine a future. Then you hear wheels creaking down the path, a merchant's cart. You look up to see a young man waving. He's the apothecary from the next town, one who sometimes trades for your herbs. "Mistress," he calls, "I've been hearing your name in markets farther than this valley. They say the widow of Leek makes salves stronger than the abbey's own." You smile. Let them keep saying it. It saves me the cost of a sign. He laughs and dismounts, bringing you a small parcel in exchange for dried mint. Inside are 3 tiny glass bottles of oil, rosemary, poppy, and rose. "For your craft," he says, "and for your comfort." You thank him and offer tea. He stays a while, chatting about markets, road thieves, and rumors of war in distant lands. Before leaving, he glances at the convent garden behind your cottage. "You've turned this place into something remarkable," he says. You look at the green rose, the small wooden charm buried under one bed of rosemary. "No," you answer. "It turned itself. I just stopped getting in its way." After he leaves, you walk through the garden. The nuns have begun visiting regularly again, and the sisters laugh more now. Even the priest passes by without comment, perhaps realizing he can no longer control what's already blooming. Still, something feels different in the air, not danger. Exactly, but anticipation. Change always stirs before it announces itself. That evening, Lady Marjorie visits. She looks invigorated, her cheeks flushed. Her hair streaked with silver she no longer bothers to hide. "You've heard?" she asks. "Heard what?" "The steward is dead. Fever. It swept through the manor. His brother, the same one who tried to take my lands, left for the city. I've been named caretaker until a new lord arrives." You blink, so you're in charge. "For now," she says, smiling faintly. "It's strange. They come to me for decisions now, the same men who once told me women shouldn't meddle in matters of property." You raise your cup to meddling. She clinks her goblet against yours. To widows, the most consistent form of rebellion. You spend hours talking about the fields, the taxes, the songs that still echo through the village. When she leaves, the sky has turned a soft, smoky purple. You watch her carriage disappear down the road and feel an unfamiliar warmth bloom in your chest, pride, maybe, or kinship. Over the next few weeks, the village begins to change quietly. Under Marjorie's guidance, the manor opens its storehouses to the poor. The priest preaches moderation in taxation, a miracle in itself. The sisters plant more herbs. And even the children hum songs that once would have drawn scorn. But nothing changes without consequence. One afternoon, a messenger arrives from the bishop again. The letter is formal, written in elegant Latin. You translate it slowly. "It has come to our attention that the widow of Leek continues to practice healing without clerical sanction. While her intentions may be pure, such influence among the common folk risks disorder. She is to present herself at the diocesan court within the month." You sit in silence for a long time after reading it. The same cycle, circling back, fear disguised as authority, suspicion dressed as holiness. When Elspeth hears, she curses colorfully enough to make the saints blush. "They won't rest until you either bow or burn," she says. You shake your head. "Then I'll do neither. I'll walk in." Marjorie insists on accompanying you. "If they want to judge one widow," she says, "let them face two." The morning of the hearing, the sky hangs gray and heavy. The diocesan court sits in a cold hall of stone, its walls lined with painted saints who all seem to look away. The bishop himself presides, an old man with kind eyes, which somehow makes it worse. "You've been accused," he begins, "of overstepping your station, healing without license, teaching without ordination, speaking without submission." You bow your head slightly. "All true." He blinks. "You admit it?" "I do," you say softly, "because none of it is sin." A murmur ripples through the onlookers. The bishop sighs. "The church is not your enemy, child." "No," you reply, "but fear is, and fear wears many robes." He studies you for a long time. Finally, he says, "You may keep your garden, but it will be placed under holy supervision. You are not to instruct others without clerical oversight." You nod. "Then let your men come. They can watch. The plants don't mind." It isn't victory, but it isn't defeat. It's something in between, which, you've learned, is where survival lives. When you return home, the villagers are waiting. They ask what happened. Their faces tense. You tell them everything, the accusation, the warning, the verdict. Then you add, "They'll be watching, so make sure they see kindness." The crowd smiles, murmurs, then disperses. That night, you write a new letter, not to your husband this time, but to whoever comes after. They will always find reasons to silence us. So keep your hands busy, your words gentle, and your truth louder than their fear. Historians still debate how much agency widows truly possessed in medieval courts. Many records show small, persistent acts of resistance, quiet victories that left no monument but changed daily life for those who followed. You seal the letter and place it in your chest beside the others. The garden rustles softly outside, as if listening. You whisper to the dark, "They can watch, but I'll keep growing anyway." And outside, under a sky heavy with stars, the herbs sway in agreement, green, defiant, alive. The days grow long again. Sunlight stretches over the fields, spilling across the cottage walls, washing everything in a faint gold haze. Life feels almost ordinary now, quietly miraculous, almost suspiciously calm. The church's watchful eyes have not disappeared, but they've grown bored. Nothing frightens authority faster than a woman who refuses to react. You wake each morning to the same rhythm: feed the hens, gather water, grind herbs, greet those who come knocking. Some arrive for cures, others just to talk. You've become a kind of confessor for those who don't trust priests with their hearts. They bring small troubles, loneliness, guilt, the ache of love they're not supposed to feel. You listen, you nod, you offer tea. Sometimes, that's enough. The widow's market thrives again. Cautiously at first, then boldly. You attend it every fortnight. No longer at the edge of the square but right in the middle. The younger widows look to you the way you once looked to Elspeth, half in gratitude, half in awe. Elspeth still comes too, her back bent but her wit sharp as ever. One afternoon, you watch her teach a group of village girls how to mend torn cloth using invisible stitches. "You see," she says, "if the world tears, you don't throw it away, you learn to sew where no one can see." You smiled to yourself. That's what all of you have been doing, stitching lives back together. Quietly, invisibly. Lady Marjorie visits often now, though she still carries herself with the air of someone waiting for fate to change its mind. She brings news from beyond the valley, rumors of new laws, new kings, new wars. Men, she says, sighing, always invent new ways to break old things. One day she arrives with something unexpected: a rolled piece of parchment bound in red string. The bishop has issued a new decree. She says, widows who own land must pay tithe directly to the church, not through the manor. It gives them control over us again. You unroll the parchment, scanning the ornate Latin. Control, you murmur, is just fear written in fancy ink. Marjorie smiles, though her eyes are weary. "I told them you'd say that." You laugh softly. "And what did they say?" "They said you'd better stop teaching the nuns Latin." You don't deny it. Language, you say, is just another kind of freedom. Once you understand the words they use to bind you, the knots start to loosen. She looks at you with admiration. "You should have been a scholar." "I am," you reply, just without permission. Later that evening, after she leaves, you walk to the convent garden. The younger sisters are tending the plants, humming that old traveling widow's song. You join them quietly, pulling weeds, letting the rhythm of their voices blend with the rustle of leaves. The air smells of rosemary and earth. Sister Agnes kneels beside you, her habit dusted with soil. You know, she says, we've started teaching some of the village girls letters. Just the basics. Reading prayers. Writing names. The bishop wouldn't approve. Then don't tell him, you reply. She grins. You sound like a sinner. I sound like someone who reads. You say. In the distance, thunder rumbles. A summer storm is building, thick, electric, unstoppable. You stand, brushing dirt from your hands. Bring the baskets inside. You tell the sisters, the rain will come fast. And it does. Within minutes, the sky opens, rain pounding the ground in sheets. You and the sisters rush inside the chapel, laughing as you close the heavy doors. The sound of rain fills the space like applause. You sit together on the floor, damp and breathless. One of the youngest nuns looks out the narrow window and whispers, "Do you think God sends storms to test us?" You shake your head. No, he sends them to remind us that nothing grows without being shaken first. Later that night, after the storm passes, you walk home under a sky washed clean. The moon gleams silver on puddles. The air thick with the scent of wet grass. The village sleeps, but you feel wide awake. At home, you light a candle and open your chest of letters. There are many now, too many to count. You read a few at random, your husband's name, Elspeth's laughter written down so you won't forget its shape. Lines of advice to girls who haven't yet been born. One letter catches your eye. It's unfinished, just a few words. For those who come after, remember that we were here. We tended, we taught, we tried. You pick up your quill and finish it. We lived in the cracks they left us, and from those cracks, flowers grew. The ink shines wet under the candlelight. You set it aside to dry. Then glance toward the window. Beyond it, the garden glimmers in the moonlight, leaves still jeweled with rain. Historians still debate whether the late medieval period allowed women's literacy to spread through convent networks. Some call it quiet revolution. Others dismiss it as myth. But scraps of parchment, signed only with initials or symbols, suggest otherwise. Women wrote of herbs, of hunger, of hope, and somehow those words survived. You run your hand over your pile of letters. Maybe one day, you whisper, someone will find these and understand we weren't invisible, we were just buried. The candle flickers lower, the flame trembling as though nodding in agreement. You lie down, the sound of dripping water steady outside. Your heart beats slow and sure. And before sleep takes you, you think, not with fear but certainty, they can bury us. But they can't stop the seeds. By late summer, the world feels heavy with ripeness, fields swollen with grain, air thick with the smell of hay and heat. The whole village hums with life. But beneath that hum is something quieter, deeper. A sense that time itself is shifting. You feel it in your bones. You're not old yet, but the years have settled on you gently. Like dust on a book long read but never forgotten. The lines on your hands look like maps of everything you've carried: grief, laughter, defiance, tenderness, and lately, you've begun to wonder what will remain when you're gone. The garden has grown wild in your care. The rosemary sprawls over the path. The mint invades everything it can reach. And the lavender hums with bees. You let it. Chaos, you've decided, is just nature remembering its freedom. One morning, Sister Agnes arrives with two young novices in tow. They want to learn, she says, smiling, properly this time. You nod. Then they'll have to get their hands dirty. You spend the day teaching them, not just herbs, but patience, how to listen to soil, how to read the language of leaves, how to know when a plant needs silence instead of touch. They write everything down on scraps of parchment. Their faces bright with the kind of hunger that isn't for food. At midday, one of them, a shy girl named Eileen, asks, "Why do you do this? Why teach us when it only brings you trouble?" You pause, thinking, because trouble passes. You say softly, but knowledge stays, and one day, you'll need it more than fear. They nod, though they can't yet understand the full weight of what you mean. Later that evening, as the sun dips low, you walk to the hill above the village. From here, you can see everything, the smoke from the cottages, the winding road to the convent, the tiny glint of the manor's roof. You remember standing here years ago, clutching your veil, wondering how to survive the next day. Now you stand bareheaded, the wind threading through your hair, and realize you did. Elspeth joins you, her steps slow but sure. You've turned the place into a miracle, she says, looking at the garden below. They'll name herbs after you soon. You laugh. Let's hope they're the kind that heal, not poison. She chuckles. There's not much difference. It's all in the dosage. The two of you sit on the grass, watching the sun sink into the hills. The light softens everything, the cottages, the fences, even the scars on your hands. Elspeth sighs. Do you ever think of leaving? Just walking until the road runs out? Sometimes, you admit, but then I remember. Someone has to stay and keep the door open. For who? For whoever comes next. That night, after she's gone, you find yourself writing again. The candle burns low, its flame steady, unafraid. To whoever finds this place, you write. Know that it was built on quiet hands and stubborn hearts. We weren't saints, we were survivors. And that is holier than anyone ever told us. You stop, the ink glistening, and glance around your small cottage, the shelves of jars, the window glowing with moonlight, the faint hum of crickets outside. Everything feels temporary, yet infinite. A knock interrupts your thoughts. It's Lady Marjorie, cloak thrown loosely over her shoulders. They've sent word from the city. She says, the bishop is dead, a new one will take his place. You raise an eyebrow. And will this one bless us or bury us? She smiles. Perhaps neither. Perhaps he'll be too busy to notice us at all. You grin. That would be a miracle worth praying for. She lingers by the fire. And the two of you talk, not of laws or priests, but of smaller, softer things. The taste of ripe plums. The sound of rain on thatched roofs. The way the world feels lighter after laughter. When she leaves, you walk outside again. The night air is warm, carrying the faint scent of smoke and jasmine. You can hear the convent bells ringing in the distance, calling for evening prayers. You don't go. Instead, you whisper your own. Thank you for the hunger that became wisdom. Thank you for the silence that became strength. And thank you for every woman who learned to bloom in the dark. The wind answers with a soft rustle through the leaves, as if the garden itself is praying with you. Historians still debate how much legacy women like you left behind. Their names rarely appear in ledgers or chronicles. Yet their work survived in recipes, songs, and small acts of mercy that outlived empires. Perhaps history doesn't record such women because it can't, because endurance is a story too quiet for ink and too vast for parchment. You return inside, close the shutters, and sit by the fire one last time. On the table lies the brooch Marjorie gave you, the carved token from the pilgrim, and the parchment with Alina's words, "Sing anyway." You touch each one gently, as if confirming they were real. Then you add a new line to your latest letter. If they ever ask who we were, tell them we kept the fire burning. The flame flickers higher, casting your shadow against the wall, tall, still, unbroken. And somewhere beyond the fields, a nightingale begins to sing. The last summer of your life arrives quietly, without ceremony. The mornings are slow and golden, the air feels softer, as if the world itself is being careful with you. Even the garden seems to move differently now, its rhythm gentler. Unhurried. You wake early each day. Not out of habit but gratitude. The body aches more than it used to. Yes, but pain feels like proof. Proof that you're still here. That you've outlasted everything meant to break you. The sisters visit often now, bringing bread and stories. Elspeth comes less, her steps slower. Her laughter thinner but no less sharp. Lady Marjorie still writes, sending notes sealed with wax shaped like a flame. She always ends the same way. We are still standing. Sometimes you sit on the hill overlooking the valley, watching the smoke curl from the chimneys below. The village is changing again, new children, new songs, new gossip, but the old cruelties are fading. Too. Women laugh louder at the market. The priest speaks softly when he passes. Even the church's latest bishop, too busy with his own affairs, has forgotten to fear you. It's a strange sort of freedom, not being hunted, not being holy, just being. At twilight, you light your candle and open your chest of letters. There are so many now, bundled with bits of twine, some smudged from tears or rain. You read a few, smiling at the handwriting that's grown steadier with age. You trace one line with your finger. We lived in the cracks they left us, and from those cracks, flowers grew. You whisper, they're still growing. As night deepens, you hear the faint rustle of feet outside, the sound of two girls from the convent. Eileen and another you've never met. They knock softly. Mistress? You open the door. They carry a small basket, rosemary, mint, lavender, all tied together with ribbon. For you, Eileen says shyly. We thought your garden might like a visit from ours. You laugh gently. Then come in. The old garden always welcomes company. Inside, they sit by the fire, wide-eyed, eager to listen. Sister Agnes told us you were once in trouble with the bishop. The younger one blurts out, "What did you do?" You smile. I told the truth. They exchange glances. And you weren't afraid? Oh, I was. You admit, but fear's just proof that something matters. You pour them tea, the kind sweetened with honey and wisdom, and the three of you talk until the candle burns low. They tell you about the convent's new lessons, how the sisters now teach reading to orphaned girls, how the priest no longer objects as long as it's called copying prayers. You grin, a clever disguise. The saints won't mind. Before they leave, Eileen hesitates. Will you come visit us soon? You touch her hand. If I don't, then remember what I said. Keep learning. Keep laughing, and if they ever tell you to stay quiet, sing instead. When they're gone, the cottage feels full again, as if their laughter still lingers in the air. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you can almost hear Elena's voice. The tune she once sang. She waits by the window. Her fire grown cold, only now, your fire isn't cold. It burns steady and soft, like memory made light. In the days that follow, you spend your hours tending the garden one last time. You cut the herbs and hang them to dry. You label the jars for whoever will come next. You even polish the small chest that holds your letters, wrapping it in cloth and tucking it beneath the floorboards. Not hidden, just waiting. One evening, Elspeth visits. She sits beside you in silence for a long time. The two of you watching the sunset melt into the horizon. Do you ever regret not remarrying? She asks. You shake your head. I married the world instead. It was difficult, unpredictable, but at least it let me speak. She laughs softly. Then you chose well. When she leaves, you feel the quiet settle around you. Deep and kind, you walk outside once more. The night air is warm, fragrant with mint and earth. Fireflies blink among the herbs like small, wandering prayers. You lie down in the grass and look up at the stars. They seem closer than they used to, as if the heavens themselves are leaning in to listen. You think of everything, the funeral, the veil, the hunger, the whispers, the laughter, the songs. All of it has become one long breath, one long life. You whisper, if anyone ever asks who we were, tell them we kept the light alive when no one else would. The wind answers softly through the rosemary. The stars shimmer as though nodding. And then, in the slow rhythm of the crickets and the sighing night, your breath evens. The world exhales with you. Time, like the tide, folds over the memory of your small cottage. Seasons pass. The garden grows wild again. Then tame, then wild once more. The letters beneath the floor stay dry, waiting for hands that will one day find them and marvel that a woman once wrote herself into history. Quietly and completely. Historians, centuries later, will debate her name. Was she healer, heretic, saint, or simply survivor? But her words will speak for her. We were here. And if someone listens closely enough, on quiet nights when the wind moves through the rosemary and mint, they'll hear it still, that soft, defiant whisper from long ago. Sing anyway. End of script. Sweet dreams.